Hello, and welcome to Honor Talk. This is the podcast where we explore the legacy left behind in the wake of organ, eye, and tissue donation. I'm your host, Bobby Gomez. Just a quick note, the views and the stories that are shared here are my own. They do not represent any specific organ procurement organization. Thanks for pressing play today. Now let's get started.
Got it. Okay. So
Why
introduction, Bobby.
What is?
Why? Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have a hard conversation. This is a conversation that we're all scared of.
Yes. All right. So everyone is scared of this conversation. For those that are listening, you know this story as the New York Times story. So if you're in the OPO world, you've heard of this story as a New York Times story, and you're going to find out really quickly as to why we don't call it the New York Times story. But for context, you understand this is a New York Times story. If you're not for the organ procurement world and you don't dabble in organ donation, transplantation, the reason that we are doing a prequel to this particular episode is because it is very important that we understand the differences between what a brain dead organ donation looks like and what a donation after cardiac death looks like. What do you think, Ivan?
Well, I mean, you're already way ahead, right? You're already way ahead because the truth is
this language?
Well, listen, this is the story of the man who came back from brain death. That's the way this story is told. The man that came back from brain death, right? And before we even get into the concept of understanding brain death versus donation after cardiac death, we have to let out the reality of this. This man was never declared brain dead. So the premise of the story is already wildly incorrect.
Yeah. Without giving up too much of the episode, thanks, Ivan. Without giving up too much of the episode, I think it is very important. It is very, in seriousness, it is very important that the listener understand the difference between a brain dead organ donor and a DCD or a donation after cardiac death. Should I get into it?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are two pathways to organ donation. Okay. So there are two pathways. The first pathway we're going to talk about is brain death or brain dead organ donors. When a individual that comes into a hospital is declared either with one declaration or two, contingent on the state that you're in. Now, this is a legal diagnosis. After a physician has conducted an exam, a neuro exam, that would include the evaluation of pupils, corneals, cough, gag reflex, respiratory drive, painful stimuli, and then there's going to be a confirmatory exam to evaluate blood circulating through the brain. Sometimes it's done with an apnea trial. But once you have that confirmatory exam done by either one or two physicians, that is a legal declaration. That is a time of death. Now, in order for this to be legal, the physician will actually document this in the patient's permanent medical chart. There will be two separate physicians or one physician. And in that, they will say the person has been declared brain dead at such and such date and time. That is the date and time that will show up on the death certificate. That is brain dead. Now,
Can I pause you there, Bobby?
Please.
All right. Let's very quickly differentiate how brain death declarations are done from one state to the next. For example, here in the state of California, you need two separate exams completed by two different physicians. That is not true in every state of the country. Some states, like in New York, only one brain death exam is required. Sure. Okay. So I just want to differentiate that.
Yes, very true. So if a person is a registered donor, on the very top, the very first line of that registry says, upon my death, I will be an organ donor and such, and it'll go on. So since that person has been legally declared brain dead, that individual is now going to move on to be an organ donor. Now, there's not going to be movement in this patient. There's not going to be pupils. There won't be cough. Those things don't return. Now,
Bobby, a brain dead patient can have some movement. I mean, that's not.
Well, I was going to get in there. Reflexes.
Okay,
we'll get into
right,
reflexes.
Okay, all right.
So you can have patients that are legally declared brain dead that will have spinal reflex, which is involuntary movement of muscles, and typically extremities, hands, feet, things like that. Things that are not considered congruent with brain death. Facial grimacing, if somebody is like wincing or they look like they're in pain, that person is not brain dead if they have that. I think a big problem that we have in the declaration of brain death is that it's not done often. A physician may do maybe 2 to 5 brain death exams in their entire 30-year career. So it's not done very often. And because of this, what ends up happening is you have physicians that either don't complete the full exam, they omit portions of the exam, they do it prematurely, they do it under paralytics where the paralytics have not had the opportunity to clear. And then lo and behold, those paralytics clear or something happens, the patient gets slightly better. And it's not necessarily that the patient returned from brain death. It's that they were never brain dead in the first place.
Or declared appropriately or according to protocol and policy, right?
Yeah.
I want to go back to this concept of movement in a patient who is declared brain dead. And I want to make it very clear. A patient who is brain dead will not have purposeful movement. In other words, they're not going to look around and spot people. They're not going to move their hand. They're not going to raise their hand and try to call someone over. Those are behaviors that do not occur. Those are movements that do not occur for someone who is in fact brain dead. No purposeful movements.
The closest thing that people will come back with and say, well, I felt somebody squeeze my hand. If you squeeze or move an extremity, so let's just say you're holding a loved one's hand and you squeeze their hand, if they're brain dead, that signal that's felt by the hand, it innervates the spine. So it goes up the arm, it innervates the spine, and then it mimics that same movement back. So if you have somebody that you squeeze their hand, they feel you squeeze back. If you move their finger, they move their finger. Things like that, they'll mimic it right back. That's a spinal reflex. If you want to know if that movement is true, then that particular movement that particular pain or that particular feeling has to be initiated at the trunk of the body. So it has to be done centrally, not to a hand or to a foot.
Okay, so very big difference between a patient who has been declared brain dead and a patient who has gone through neurological checks.
Right.
There's a difference between a neuro check and a brain death exam.
Yeah, neuro checks are done on the daily. I mean, this is exactly what you just said. This is a nurse coming in, evaluating a patient, looking at neurological exams. And typically they're looking at these because either they're improving or they're losing reflexes. So today they had corneals, tomorrow they don't have corneals. They're looking to see if there's progression or regression. That's not to say that the nurse is doing a brain death exam, because nurses do not declare brain death. Well, I think that we've touched on what brain death is. Let's talk about donation after cardiac death. Let's talk about what the difference is and why there's a difference there.
Yeah.
Okay, so the difference here is that when you have a patient who doesn't rise to the level of brain death, they never lose pupil reflex. They never lose their ability to overbreathe. So overbreathing the vent, right? Your respiratory drive is the most primitive thing that we have at the base of the brain. And so it is typically the last reflex to leave. Sometimes an individual will have an injury, but they never fully succumb to brain death. They never have enough of a catastrophic injury to actually cause brain death to fully be there. And so they will still have different brainstem reflexes. If even one brainstem reflex is still present, that individual is not brain dead. I'll say that again. If even one reflex, if they initiate a breath, if they blink their eyes, if their pupils move, if they incite a cough, if they have a gag, if any one of those things, there is no almost brain dead. You're either brain dead or you're not brain dead. Now, that pathway, when a patient still has a brainstem reflex left, that pathway is a different pathway. In this pathway, the family has chosen to remove ventilator support and have a compassionate end-of-life process, a withdrawing of the ventilator, a withdrawing of medications to allow their loved one to pass in a dignified manner.
So, in Ivan speak, this is a scenario where a doctor or a team of doctors, palliative physicians, maybe a nurse practitioner, an attending physician, even a social worker, they get together with the family and they say something to this effect. Mr. or Mrs. Smith, your loved one has suffered a catastrophic brain injury. Right now, there is a minimal brain function that we can observe. He or she still has some reflexes intact, that his pupils are still reacting. We consider doing brain death exams, but because that reflex is intact, it's not appropriate for him. However, this is a non-recoverable injury. And the only way that he is going to be maintained is through long-term ventilation. And that is something that we cannot do in the intensive care unit. That would require him being moved to a different facility where long-term care could be provided for him. And the family at that point, hearing that, says, no, he would never want to be this way. He made it very clear to us that this is not the type of quality of life that he would want. And it's time for us to allow him to leave in a dignified way. We're going to choose to remove him from life support.
Yeah, this is where the family chooses that they do not want that persistent vegetative state for their loved one. And they want to start moving towards comfort measures and allowing their loved one to pass in a dignified manner, removing all the ventilator support, removing medications, and just allowing them to pass naturally. Now, let's talk about those two different things and how they look different for the OPO. So on one instance, you have a patient who is declared legally dead. They have no brainstem reflexes. By the legal definition, they are deceased.
They have a documented time of death.
They have a documented time of death, correct. Thank you. They have a documented time of death. The other individual is not dead. The other individual does not have a documented time of death. The individual that we're talking about on the other end has enough injury that the family has chosen to remove the ventilator. In the first instance, in the brain dead scenario, from the OPO standpoint, they will evaluate that donor. They will optimize organ function. This is the change. When that patient is moved, they moved directly to the operating room, and the procedure happens like any other operation. They will enter the operating room with the tube still in, with medication still running. They will begin the operation. They will begin the recovery with that person still intubated. Remember, they are deceased. This is the deceased individual. They will start that retrieval of the organs, the gifts. They will start the retrieval of the gifts. That person's still ventilated. They're still given medications. Now let's talk about the DCD, the donation after cardiac death. In this instance, this one gets complicated.
I want to add something, though, because there's something extremely different between both of those pathways. When a patient is brain dead, the organ procurement organization takes over the care for that donor. Everything that is done and provided for that donor is now managed and taken care of by the organ procurement organization.
Correct.
When a patient is brain dead.
Only when they're brain dead. For the donation after cardiac death, for the DCD individual, the organ procurement team will get involved. They will collaborate with the hospital as a partner. They will collaborate with the bedside physician. They will work with the physician and the healthcare team to optimize organ function. They will only do the minimum things that are needed to be non-invasive to be able to make donation happen because this patient is still alive. Once they have optimized the organ function, once they have found recipients, and only then they will be able to move forward or allow the family to move forward with comfort measures. Now, this is the part where it becomes very difficult because it takes time and families don't like for us to be waiting around. Once we have optimized organ function, we have found recipients, the ventilator support is outside of the OR. The ventilator support is removed. The patient is allowed to pass away naturally under the comfort of the hospital, the direction of the physician, the nurse. The OPO has no involvement in the comfort care process. They don't dictate what medications are given. They don't dictate how much medications are given. They don't dictate any of that. If the patient succumbs to their injuries in a certain amount of time, when it's state dependent, sometimes it's 60, sometimes it's 90 minutes, sometimes it's 120 minutes. Every organ is different. Every state is different. If the patient succumbs to their injuries in that time interval, then and only then is that patient wheeled to the operating room and organs are recovered after that patient is declared deceased.
Now, Bobby, there are some cardinal rules that organ procurement organizations follow for a non-brain dead donor. For non-brain dead donors, organ procurement organizations, they normally are hands-off. They cannot touch patients who are still alive. And that's where the collaboration comes into play here between the hospital and the OPO. All right, that's one cardinal rule. The other cardinal rule is no invasive procedures for a patient who is still alive.
It's starting to change a little bit.
That's scary. But
That's
the cardinal
scary.
rule, no invasive procedures for a patient who's still alive in preparation for organ recovery.
Yeah, no,
Although-
you're right. There's one more cardinal rule.
Tell
It's
us.
the 5-minute observation period. So this is an important part too. Once that patient, so donation after cardiac death, this is a non-brain dead patient, right? So the family is in the room, support is withdrawn, the loved one is allowed to succumb to their injuries under the direction of the physician and the nurse, the bedside, the hospital. They succumb to their injuries. In that moment, typically the physician will call out time of death. It's not time of death. It is the beginning of what they call an observation period. By law, the organ procurement organization has to allow 5 minutes hands off, not touching the patient. In that 5-minute interval, they allow for any type of what they call auto resuscitation, any opportunity that the heart will start again. So after that 5-minute interval, the physician will then listen. He will listen to the heart. Sometimes they'll put an ultrasound on to see if there's any heart movement. There's different things that whatever the physician is comfortable with. If there is no heart movement and the person still is flatlined or is in a non-survivable rhythm and the person's heart has then stopped, at that moment, that is when the doctor will call out the time of death. And then the procurement will begin after that. So there is a 5-minute observation that has to happen. That doesn't happen with brain dead donors. Brain dead donors are vastly different.
And I want to be very clear here. While that patient is being observed in those 5 minutes, the transplant team who is in the building to assist in the recovery of organs, they are in fact sequestered away from the patient.
Yeah.
They are not in the operating room with the patient while that observation is occurring. The transplant team who is there to assist with the recovery, they are sequestered in a completely separate room. It is very clear that cardinal rule is never crossed.
In my experience, transplant teams are not only sequestered away from the family, the loved ones, the donor himself until everything is ready for recovery. They don't even want to be on the same floor. If we have to huddle about something, they're not going to be at the bedside. They're not coming up to the ICU. They want a complete divide between the hospital and transplant teams. This way, there is no conflict of interest whatsoever. Transplant teams, OPOs, are very diligent about not crossing the lines and blurring the lines when it comes to end-of-life process and withdrawal life support.
So, Bobby, you and I, in listening to Donna and TJ's story, we could hear where a lot of this communication went wrong. We can hear where some of these things kind of went off the rail, but not everyone could see it the way we see it. Now, you said this a few weeks ago. We're not investigative reporters. We come from the perspective of having worked for organ procurement organizations for over 2 decades in combined experience. We could look at this and make sense of it, but the average person looks at this case and just like you'll hear on this show here soon, there's a lot of confusion that can happen in all of this.
Well, let me tell you how I heard it. It was like somebody explaining a movie to you, but they're giving you 2 different movies and they're explaining it to you at the same time. And it was like, that's not one movie. You're telling me about 2 different movies because you're giving me pieces and parts of each movie and it's not making sense. That's not one movie. So as I'm listening to the story, this movie starts turning into a nightmare because every piece that you're telling me is a part of DCD. It's a part of brain death, and then it switches back, and now we're on the brain death side, and then we're DCD again, depending on where the story is coming from. So we're hopeful that you guys listen to the story. We're hopeful that you guys listen. I hope that this pre-explanation gives a little bit of context as to what you're about to hear. But listen to the story now that you know the difference between brain death and DCD, and you decide for yourself where that confusion lies. You can see how the story kind of comes apart, where it begins to unravel, and let's listen with open ears and figure out how we can make it so that this doesn't happen again.
And Bobby, if I'm correct, this is the very first Honor Talk podcast 2-part episode.
Yeah, it's too much to fit into one. So we'll see you for part 1, and we'll see you later for part 2. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy.
There it is. Enjoy.
I've spent more than 2 decades sitting beside families during moments no one ever expects to face. Over the years, I've witnessed incredible love, quiet strength, and the deep desire to hold on to every moment possible. I've learned that families rarely remember every conversation that took place in the hospital. What they remember are the moments they shared together. A hand held, a story told, a laugh through tears. Those moments inspired me to create living legacy expressions, not simply as a memory-making kit, but as an opportunity for families to slow down, be present, and create something meaningful together. Because while we can't give families more time, we can help make the time they have together truly unforgettable. Living legacy expressions, helping families create meaningful memories that last a lifetime.
Donna, you also don't strike me like a person who doesn't speak up for herself. If you have a problem with something, I believe that we will know about it.
Yeah, my brothers taught me
Yeah,
that.
that's kind of why I feel a little bit more comfortable, because when I reach out, I figure, okay, well, trust me, if Donna's not in the space to have a conversation, she's going to let you know. In my mind, it's not even a question.
Yeah.
You know, I really appreciate that about you.
Yes.
It's also one of the first things that intimidated me. You intimidated me, Donna, at first. I thought, okay, this woman is no joke. She will tell you how she feels. And, you know.
And that's what we love about her.
That's true.
Yeah. All right. So let's let Bobby pick this up.
Donna, I want you to just introduce yourself. So Ivan and I know who you are, but the people that are listening don't know who you are. What I will say is that in the communities and the circles that we serve, you're known as the New York Times story. And I know that we've talked about this in the past, that that's not how you want to be known, that was not even the content really. But just tell us, introduce yourself. Who are you?
I am Donna Rohr, the caregiver for TJ Hoover, not the identity that I or we have been given through the New York Times story. And that's what I would like to have known today.
So what are we talking about today, Donna? Can you just tell us a little bit about what happened to you? What brought us all together today? And then we'll dig into it even further.
What brought us all together is actually received an invite to the live, and I joined and wasn't going to say anything at first because the lack of trust, in the system, and never know who you're really talking to. And I'd been through enough, I feel like, bad publicity and kind of being right through the mud, and I didn't want to do that anymore. But that's what brought the podcast together. And TJ's story, of waking up as he was about to be an organ donor is what we're here to talk about today.
You and I have had conversations here recently, and we've talked about all the medical records and all the different things. Before we started the podcast and before we started the recording, I wanted to go through it one more time because I was in disbelief about one thing. But I went through over nearly 4,000 pages that you supplied me from both from the organ procurement side as well as from the hospital side. And
Absolutely.
In the 4,000 pages that I went through, not once was the word or the term brain dead in there. The only place that I find brain dead or brain death is the cardiac cath that was performed, which I believe was the morning of.
Yes.
However,
Yes.
what I find interesting is, and we'll get into this too, in the videos that are shared, that are out there in the social platforms, the term is used very loosely, brain dead and brain death.
It is. And that's what we were told. I had no idea that it took a declaring of death for someone to be brain dead. That wasn't discussed with us. And all we had to go on was what the hospital staff were telling us.
Yeah, well, let's rewind because the person here at hand is TJ, right? So let's talk
Right.
about TJ. Can you just tell us a little bit about TJ, who he is to you? I know who he is to you. Just tell us a little backstory about who TJ is.
TJ is my baby brother. I also call him my adopted son because I wasn't able to have kids of my own. So TJ is 12 years younger than I am. So he's always been attached to my hip. He calls us peas and carrots is what TJ calls us. And yeah, he says we're like peas and carrots. He said because most people don't like us and we're just too different. That's his saying anyway. But TJ is he liked all things outdoors. He enjoyed hiking. He enjoyed camping, doing things with his hands. He was constantly doing things with his hands. Anything to do with nature is where TJ found his peace at. And friends, he had a small circle. He always said 4 quarters was more valuable than 100 pennies to him. And that's kind of how he kept his circle with 4, 4
I
or 5.
like that.
Yeah, 4 or 5 close friends.
I like that. It's quality over quantity.
Absolutely. And that's how TJ lived his life, was quality over quantity. And anything he was doing, honestly.
So, Donna, if we're talking about TJ and his life prior to this occurrence at a hospital, let's talk about what brought him to the hospital. I mean, I know that he was an avid outdoorsman. He loves nature, loves being out there, and he's in the right state for that. But on that particular day, paint us a picture about the time frame, what happened, how did he come into the hospital?
Well, leading up to 4 months prior, our mother passed away. And that was another mental break, for TJ. And that was one that he just couldn't shake off. And it was on our mother's birthday. And she had just passed 4 months prior. And he overdosed on her birthday. He found himself back into drugs again and was looking for a way to, I say, numb the pain. And he thought he was doing it, but really he wasn't. And cardiac arrest led him into the hospital. They said subsequent to a drug overdose. But we were also told they felt like maybe that it was a suicide attempt because of him mixing as much and the substances that he mixed.
Okay. And when this happened, how did he get to the hospital? Was he in your home? Was 911 called? Was he down for a long time? What happened on that day?
He was at his girlfriend's home. That's who he was living with at the time. And she called me and told me that EMS was on the way. He was face down on the pavement, unresponsive. And 911 was actually on the way at that time when she called me. And he was down for I think what I read in the medical records was like almost 35 minutes total.
Okay. Rewind that just really fast on it. The timeline. So was it a Friday that this occurred? Because this is going to come into effect here pretty quick.
It was on a Monday.
This was a Monday. Okay. So we won't give dates, but we know that. So just for those that are listening, keep that in mind. So this is Monday that this incident occurred. And if I remember correctly, if my memory serves me, this was really early in the morning that this happened, right?
Like between about 3 a.m. in the morning. Yes, on the 25th.
Okay. So Monday, 3 a.m. is when he's found down. Prolonged downtime, ambulance comes out and transports him to the hospital. So here we are at Monday. So you get into the hospital on a Monday and take us through. So what happens right away? I mean, they take you back. They start telling you what occurred and they give you some feedback. Where do you go from there?
From there, we got to the emergency room.
Okay. So I do want to point out, Bobby, that we are talking about a time and space when COVID was active. So we're talking about a hospitalization during time of COVID.
It wasn't 2020, right? It was 2021.
2021.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But,
Very
okay.
active, right? You're right, Ivan. This is a very active moment in time when policies, procedures, protocols are vastly different than what we've ever known before, and to be honest, even since.
Yeah,
so
nothing was normal in that in that moment.
No.
There was nothing.
Nothing
normal.
was normal. And to give some context, and not to give this is not to give anyone grace, but I'll give some context, and I guess maybe a little grace. Hospital systems across the board, they were very worried about our visitors and who was coming in, who was going out. I've never seen visitor restrictions like I've seen during the COVID period. The rooms that were typically used for visitors and waiting rooms were almost null and void. They were not used. Some of them were even repurposed for other reasons. So visitation in a hospital in 2020 and 2021, and even extending into 2022, to be honest, it was non-existent. And in those hospital systems where there was visitors, it was very limited. We're talking 1 and 2 visitors, if that. So with that being said, now you're in the emergency department and they allowed you finally to come in and see him.
They didn't allow us to come in and see him until they was actually taking him up to the ICU. We wasn't allowed in the room where he was in the ER at all. The doctor, like you said, there was a little bench close to the door. Finally, they allowed 2 of us in there because there was nobody else in there at 3 a.m. in the morning. And the doctor came out and told us that with his downtime that he could already tell the first conversation that the doctor had with us, he said that he could tell that there was going to be a significant brain injury there because he said he was already showing signs through, I'm assuming, the CAT scan and stuff that they done at that point. I don't know how they would have had time to do that. It was so soon in, but already at that point, he was saying there was significant damage to his brain.
And Donna, could you paint us a picture? Are we talking about a large trauma center in your area, or is this a rural hospital?
No, it's a rural hospital.
So it's a rural hospital. So we have emergency room physicians and an intensive care unit. So we are speaking about a hospital who should know what they're doing, period.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, I mean, you and I, Ivan, we have enough experience to know hospitals that do donation on a regular basis and that deal with neuro injuries on a regular basis, they're more diligent about certain things and their verbiage, the way they do tests, the way they do certain things. Hospitals that are closer to community hospitals, they're not as well versed. And they typically, you know this as well as I do, if a neuro injury comes in and it's something that is relatively significant, what is the first thing they're going to want to do with this patient? Transfer.
Well,
they want to transfer.
Yeah, they want a higher level of care. They want to get them out to a higher level of care.
But sometimes the person's injury or illness surpasses the timeline in which they can even facilitate that transfer. So they can't. It's the person. They deteriorate to a point which is so fast that there is no higher level of care will get them what they need. And so they figured, well, we are going to start either de-escalating care or giving the family like final options, because no escalation of care is going to serve this person any good, which is unfortunate, but correct. And they figure, well, no higher level of care is going to be able to offer them any different. And so they will just start with end of life options at that point. But this is a community hospital.
And I also want to come back to this idea that who knows what type of luck they would have had to transfer in the moment of COVID to a higher level of care, right? Like who knows if they even had the space at that moment in time.
Normally, that hospital, if it's something that they're not really qualified to take care of, they will transfer to UK, the University of Kentucky Hospital. But because he was a code blue and they hadn't managed to get his heart back, they take you to the one closest to where you're at. So that's how he ended up at, Baptist Health Richmond to begin with. Went in as a code blue.
So typically speaking, when this hospital that TJ went to, if the injury is larger than what they can handle, they typically will take them over to UK Health, which is a larger trauma center in Kentucky. In his case scenario, because he had already coded, they needed to take him to the closest facility, and this is the hospital he went to because his injury was so severe. They just needed to get him to a hospital.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's pretty normal. I mean, in all the years I've done EMS, the closest hospital, anytime you have a life-saving measure, CPR is in progress, you have a airway that's not secure. The only things where you're going to bypass a hospital is like if it's a burn or maybe a trauma. Sometimes they'll write it into the protocols that if it's a certain particular thing, they want you to just bypass that hospital and keep on going to the specialty hospital if it's something like that. But whenever you have CPR in progress or an unsecured airway, one of those two things, normally you're going to go to the closest facility, and then they figure out on the back end, we'll transfer if needed. But it makes sense that he went to this smaller hospital given his injuries.
Okay, so you did not get to see him until you get to the ICU, but you did have some interaction with an emergency room physician who had shared that there was likely going to be some level of brain injury because of the condition that he came in with. Tell us more about your interaction with ICU staff, or tell us more about the story in the critical care setting.
Well, like you were saying, COVID, the restrictions were the hospital was open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and that was it. ICU was open from 9 until 7, and it could only be one person. So COVID limited how we handled it as a family anyway. But the ICU staff was like, they were there, but they were non-existent. The only one that we really had interaction with was the ICU supervisor. And, pretty much from...
So I just want to make clear, the only person you were having interaction with was the ICU supervisor, and you were the only person allowed in to see TJ. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, this is the part where when we talked about this, you said the ICU supervisor, and not to jump ahead, but I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. You never had a meeting with any of the physicians. I mean, your interactions were really isolated for the most part to this ICU supervisor. That was kind of your point of contact. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And see that, Ivan, that's a big change. Like that's vastly different. We are used to physicians, especially with the neural injury, physicians wanting to meet goals of care meetings, end of life conversations, or even just a discussion about prognosis, like where we are. But for it to go third party through a ICU supervisor and not directly from a physician, I mean, it's like the game of telephone.
Well, let me say this, and I'm going to let Donna correct me. But
Okay.
Listen, if I show up to a hospital and I'm having a conversation with a healthcare person, right? Especially if I'm there in a case of emergency for my brother or my sister, if I don't know any better, and I get somebody that walks into the room and says, hey, this is what's going on with your loved one. This is what's happening. This is what we're planning. This is what is going to happen in the next few hours. I'm going to look at that person and find a level of trust. Like, okay, this person knows what's going on, right? Like, I'm going to put some trust in them. Now, that may not be correct, okay? But that's an automatic that a lot of us in our society, that's the trust that we give. And I think that that's something that may have happened in this case scenario. Now, listen, me as a healthcare worker, I'm going to look at the badge. I'm going to find out who this person is. I'm going to dig deeper. But not all of us are that way. Donna, when you hear me say this, where did you fall in this way of communicating with this nurse supervisor, with this ICU supervisor?
Well, I feel like I take part of the blame because there were two of us that were looking after TJ. One was supposed to cover like a 9 to 2, and then I covered 2 to 7. So I couldn't be there a lot of times to get the communication, the same level of communication that she did, even though it was still the same ICU provider. But I just feel like I trusted him too much. I trusted him at face value.
And other than that ICU supervisor, just to be clear, did you ever have any interaction with anyone else other than that ICU supervisor?
It was just her the whole time. She's the one that I talked to.
See, that hurts my heart that really, I mean,
Donna, it doesn't even make sense, Bobby. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. And it shouldn't. I've said this before. It doesn't make sense because it shouldn't make sense. I'm going to sit on a little bit of a soapbox here. I understand coming from you, Donna, that you feel you share a little bit of the ownership because of the communication, but really, I'm going to take a little bit of that back because I don't think you really should. I get that it's 2021. But as healthcare professionals and physicians, as nurses, one point of contact, unless they were really trying to limit the contact you were having with multiple staff, this is where the communication breakdown really starts to make sense to me. This is where it starts coming together. When I heard your story and TJ's story and looked at the notes and looked at everything, and I watched the video that's on social platforms, and I see what this person is saying, either didn't understand or know what the difference between brain death and DCD donation were, which seems more likely, or didn't take enough time to understand it. I feel like had you had more people that could converse with you, that would not have been the case.
Now, you're talking about the hospital staff member, right, Bobby?
Yeah, the ICU supervisor. That's her only point of contact. There was never anybody else.
All right, Bobby. So let me play devil's advocate so that the people who are listening could hear this. So in my mind, and Bobby, you fix me here, okay?
I will.
In my mind, an ICU supervisor should know to go get a doctor to come talk to this family. I mean, that's the responsibility?
That's what I'm saying.
Go get the doctor to speak to this family. That's part of your responsibility, right?
Yes. I think that's where, I understand. That's what I was saying. I understand that Donna feels that she owns a little bit because she didn't maybe speak up or wasn't there. I'm going to take some of that back, Donna. I don't know that you necessarily should have the onus for some of this, because if you're a family member and you're given one point of contact and the person that's talking to you is either A, not versed into the donation process, or B, not versed in the neuro deficits that your brother's having and kind of the prognosis and where things are going, that is the hospital's responsibility now at this point to go and get the intensivist, to go get that person and have a conversation with you, have that goals of care meeting, because it kills me to my core to find out that to this day, the only person you talked with at the hospital is the ICU supervisor. You didn't have meetings or conversations with physicians, which, that's tough. That's a tough one. I've never seen that. But again, nothing was normal during COVID. So
you had this interaction with the ICU supervisor, Donna. What was that ICU supervisor telling you about TJ's condition?
From the get-go, she was telling us that they had, done testing and that they would do the pull on the thing, and like the life support tube, they would pull on that, and there was no reflex. There was no reflex in his feet and none in his hands. They would do something to his eyes and there was no reflexes there. And pretty much from the get-go, the conversation was that he was given such a grim prognosis that he wasn't going to make it. And then it didn't take long at all until, he's brain dead, came up in the conversation.
All right. So, Donna, Bobby and I are going to take a moment to talk about the difference between neuro checks and brain death exams. Now, Donna, you've been coming to the Honor Talk Live shows on TikTok for quite some time, and you've heard us speak about what brain death declarations are and how they are performed and how they're done. So we would like to afford the people who are listening a little bit of insight as to how brain death declarations are done. And Bobby's going to run through this very quickly because, we do need to make the distinction between doing neural checks and doing an official brain death exam. And when we met prior to this recording, Donna, we had gathered that, yes, they had done neural checks. They had tested reflexes, but there was no brain death declarations done. So I'm going to let Bobby speak on this subject matter.
Oh boy, give me this mic. All right. For those that are listening, I'm going to put this real close so you can hear what's going on here. All right. So hold on to yourself, turn up your volume so that you can actually listen to this, because we're going to go through this really quick. And this is what I'm going to tell you. This is where trust breaks down. This right here, what I'm about to give you, is the pinnacle of why people don't believe in the sanctity of organ donation, and they figure out that there is a big, huge mistrust in organ donation. There are two pathways to organ donation. One pathway is called donation after brain death. One pathway is called donation after cardiac death. We're going to talk about, just for 1 second, we're going to talk about donation after brain death. Okay. For brain death to occur, you are going to have multiple things checked. Now, a nurse on the daily per shift is going to check for neuro reflexes. A normal thing that a nurse will check for, starting top to bottom, they will check pupils to see if they change with light. They will check corneals. Now, what corneals means is they're going to touch the white part of the eye with either a piece of cotton or something very gentle to see if you blink or have the ability to blink. So that's corneals. they're going to check for a gag reflex. So typically these patients, they have a ventilator. So there's a tube that goes all the way down into the lungs. Now where the lungs split into two, right at that tip there, where the lungs split, that's the carina. Now if you touch the carina, right, which every single one of us has had a cough before, if you have phlegm or something that touches that carina, it incites a cough. That is also a neural reflex. So they're going to put that suction tube down into there to see if they can touch the carina to incite a cough. They're going to check for gag reflex. So in the mouth, the back of the oral pharynx, in the back of the mouth, you have the little punching bag, right? The little uvula. So if you take the Yankower, which is the suction device, it's a hard plastic tube, they'll put it in the back. They're going to see if they can touch that. They're going to see if they can incite a gag reflex. They're going to check for a painful response. They're going to see if you have central, and I'll explain this, central painful stimuli. They don't check for painful stimuli at the fingertips. They don't check for them at the arms. They don't check on the legs. They're checking in the trunk. They're checking from the trapezoids here on the top, your chest, your abdomen. They're going to check to see if when they incite pain, when they cause pain, if your face winces, makes any kind of movements, if you move something, or if you actually physically try and move the person away. However, that's a neuro check. A physician is going to do everything I just said, but they're going to add a few things that are not typically checked on a daily. Those things that are added during a brain death exam are cold calorics, which means they are going to take ice cold water and put it into the ears. If the person is brain dead, their eyes stay steady in the head, they do not move. However, if you put cold water in someone's ear, warning, don't do this. It's very painful. If you put cold water in the ears, the eyes will start to move in the head, typically towards the ear that actually has ice water going into it. The other thing that they will do is they do what's called doll's eyes. Now, if the person does not have a trauma to their neck and they can actually move their head, they will take the head and they will move it side to side. Now, if they do that, for those of you that are listening, if you try to move your head left and right, side to side, you'll notice that your eyes are constantly trying to focus on things. So they're constantly moving around, they're darting as you're moving side to side because you're looking for your frame of focus. However, when a person is deceased, the eyes stay steady in the head. They don't try and focus. They stay perfectly still. So no matter where you move the skull, they're not going to change. A nurse is going to check these things to a minimum standard to evaluate if those reflexes are there or not. A physician is going to check everything, including a couple other ones too, which we'll get into. But they'll also check for respiratory drive. Respiratory drive is typically the very last thing to leave. All the other neural reflexes can be gone. And normally your ability to breathe over a ventilator, that's the last reflex to leave. Hopefully I did a good job.
So, all right, Bobby, let me put this into Ivan language. Let me
here we go with Ivan
well,
language.
let me just cut down to what I'm trying to get to, okay?
Go.
Let me just cut down. Can a nurse perform brain death exams? So can a nurse tell a family that their loved one is brain dead? Why not?
I'll give some credit to nurses. They've probably seen brain death exams performed to be able to tell a family it's not looking good. I've noticed during my exams that they've deteriorated over a period of days and things are missing. However, brain death is a clinical diagnosis. That would be the equivalent of a nurse looking at somebody and going, by the way, your loved one had a heart attack. That the nurse is not qualified to be able to give a diagnosis. That's not what they're there for. That's not. Trust me, there are plenty of nurses out there that could probably have enough knowledge and experience to be able to do that, but that is not their place and their position.
I'm sure there are nurses who have seen and been a part of far more brain death exams than some of the physicians that we've worked with.
Oh, I would guarantee it. I would guarantee it.
But when we heard TJ's story, when Donna shared with us how the nurse communicated with her that TJ was brain dead, you and I both said, oh no, immediately the red flags were up. So Donna, I want to go back to this idea that the ICU supervisor communicated with you that TJ was brain dead. Did she communicate?
Before she answers that question, is there any chance that maybe, because we've seen this before, maybe this ICU supervisor told you that your loved one is likely brain dead?
No.
All right,
it
tell us what
wasn't
she
likely.
said.
She said that he's brain dead, that they had done like EEGs and there was no brain waves. There was no, like you said, the gag reflex. They took the cotton to the eyes. There wasn't anything there, and we were told that he was brain dead.
That's a massive overstep, man. That's a massive overstep.
This is the other part that blows my mind. So let's do a time check. Okay, his initial down was Monday morning, right? Bright and early, very early, 3 o'clock in the morning.
3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. When did this nurse...
35 minutes of downtime.
Yeah. When did this nurse, at what period during this hospitalization? So we know he went down Monday, was transported to the hospital on Monday. What day was it she was telling you that he was brain dead?
The same day.
Yeah, take that. Let's sit there for just a second. So
Monday afternoon, Donna?
Yes, Monday afternoon.
I can't believe that.
Okay. All right. Wait a minute. All right. Listen.
This might have been the first time Ivan hears this, maybe, or remembers this, because
Well, I mean,
I
come
was
on now.
blown away.
Come on.
Blown away
So
when I heard this.
Listen, if you go to the state of New York, they can do brain death exams on the same day. They could do, all they need is one brain death exam. Okay. And
Yeah.
for me, this concept that you could be declared brain dead with one exam is wild. But even scarier still is the idea that someone feels comfortable telling a family that their loved one is brain dead within the first 24 hours of their hospital admittance. I mean, you want to talk about ridiculous, right? Talk to us about how the body, listen, you go through an acute injury, your body may very well bounce back, Bobby.
Yeah.
You can't just declare someone in the first 24 hours of brain dead. I'm sure you
I mean,
can.
we see policies written like this where they don't allow this. So, I mean, there's a reason.
Now, and I should say that Kentucky is a 2 brain death exam state.
Well, what does that mean?
They need 2 brain death exams in order to officially declare someone deceased. So it's not, even under the best and optimum circumstances, Bobby, it's unlikely that you're going to get 2 brain death exams completed on the very first day that the patient comes to the hospital. That's very unlikely, because the patient has to be within normal parameters for those exams to occur. So to hear Donna say that they told her that he was brain dead on the first day that he came in, I mean, it's hard not to get worked up about that.
Not to get nitpicky, but I can see people in the comments already. So let me just break down this timeline. So Donna, when you say Monday morning, was this Sunday night, like Sunday night, and then so we're talking 3 o'clock in the morning on Monday? Or are we talking Monday night into 3 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday?
Sunday night into Monday.
Okay, so Monday, 3 o'clock in the morning, he comes in, we have all the downtime, and later on the same day on a Monday, you're told he's brain dead.
The same day, and we were asked about going ahead and changing his code status.
So now the hospital's asking
On
you about
Monday.
changing the code status because it seems like futile care. And I've seen this before. So here we are, we've had the incident happen this morning. We've been told now that we're brain dead Monday afternoon, and now the hospital is moving towards either de-escalating care, do not resuscitate orders, or like trying to move towards goals of care.
Well, Bobby, let me play devil's advocate here. Is it the hospital or is it this one person?
Oh, that's a good question. We don't know. I mean, we're never going to know that unless they were sitting in the fourth square here. But the problem is that you're a representative of a hospital. So we can't say that it's personal. It's the hospital. I mean, you're wearing the badge. God, I hope she wasn't doing it on her own accord, but we're going to have to take it as a representative of the hospital. But if you're now telling a hospital, you're telling a family that their beloved one is brain dead, and you're talking about de-escalating care and moving towards goals of care, do not resuscitate, all in the same day. I mean, within the span of 24 hours, we're already too fast. I don't care, COVID or not COVID. This is way too fast.
So let's pause it for just 1 second. I have a question for Donna. So Donna, when you came to the Honor Talk Live show, when you hear Bobby and I speak about what brain death is and how they do testing, how did you hear what it was that we were sharing about brain death? How did you experience the way that we speak about brain death and the testing that must occur?
Completely different than what was happening, at the hospital.
Yeah.
But I felt from the hospital that it was moving too quickly.
Did you
like
voice
we
that?
just got here.
Did you voice
I did
that?
not.
About that. Tell us more
I did
about
not, and that's one of the things that I wish I had have done. But there again, trusting, because the ICU has a pretty good reputation, at that hospital. So I was just
that. So the ICU has a good reputation, and you took their communication because you trusted.
at face value.
Yeah.
But you felt, you communicated, you shared that to us, you've shared that you felt it was moving too fast.
Yes. But being in the situation, I didn't know how fast it was supposed to move, because it's one of those things like you feel like you're in shock and time stops, but yet time's going so fast and, as well.
Yeah.
But it just didn't feel right from the beginning.
Okay, so here we are Monday morning. You've already been told at this point that TJ is brain dead. You've also been told that we're starting to move towards either de-escalation of care or otherwise. We're still on Monday. When was her an introduction to the organ procurement organization? At what point did they introduce the OPO or CODA?
Not until Wednesday.
Okay.
But let me try to clarify a little bit. We were told, like I said, on Monday and on Tuesday that he was brain dead, and we didn't want him to be a vegetable. So we chose to remove the life support. It was supposed to have been on Wednesday at 5 p.m. and the doctor didn't show up. And that's because I can't even remember who it was that talked to us. come out and said that his name had shown up on the National Database Registry as an organ donor.
So I'm going to pause there. And for the listener, I want to give a brief clarification on what is occurring here. So at the hospital when TJ arrived, it is deemed that TJ has suffered a non-survivable injury. And by law, this hospital has to call their local organ procurement organization, who at that time was Kentucky Organ Donation, so CODA. And CODA sends a representative to the hospital. It sounds like by Wednesday. Now, as a designated requester myself, as a person who has had conversations with hundreds of families about organ donation, one of the clinical cues that obligates me to interact with a family is when a family makes a decision to remove the ventilator. Now, I am obligated by federal law, by the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act, to interact with a family whose loved one is a registered donor, whose family has made a decision to remove the ventilator. That's my cue. When I hear that, I have to interact with the family. Okay, but there's something missing here that we're going to get into a little bit further. Bobby, take it from there.
You know, if you have, I mean, it's not uncommon for individuals to show up in a hospital setting, have a devastating injury, and have a hospital call an organ procurement organization because of the devastating injury. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a chance that somebody in your circle of family or friends, if they've ever suffered a devastating injury and ended up in an ICU setting, they may be alive and well at home, but at some point or another, they may have been referred. Now, the referral to the organ procurement organization doesn't mean that you're going to be a donor. What that means is that donation takes time. And in an effort to try and capture the donation potential, we have to know if that person's even a candidate. And all those things take time. We want you to go home. Our goal is not to make you a donor. We want you to go home. We want you to go back to your loved ones. We want you to go on thriving. Keep your organs. No one's trying to steal your organs. Trust me, the people at the organ procurement organization are typically the biggest advocates for you to get better. And we're the ones that normally capture or catch things in that clinical aspect to say, oh, this person, they're not a candidate for us, and we're going to just close them off our board. We think they're getting better. There's no reason for us to continue following. We wish them well, and we take them off the board. But in this instance, with TJ's and what's going on, it's just too fast. Neural injuries just take so long to recover from. So 2 days in, I mean, there are hospitals that have policies and procedures put into effect that if the person has come in for a neural injury, there's a waiting time frame before they can even conduct your first brain death exam. And that's for adults, and pediatrics are even more stringent than that.
All right, let's roll into that a little bit. You have suffered an overdose on a Monday at 3 o'clock in the morning. You come in and your body is hypothermic. You are cold. You're cold. What happens to the body as you warm up, as you come back to a baseline?
Once you get to a basic temperature, things start waking up, so to speak. Your brain starts to come back in. Neural reflexes start to show up. So in 2021, it was a lot more prevalent that they were dropping people's temperature. So after a cardiac arrest or after the CPR, after the overdose, it was found in that time frame that, and some hospitals still do this, will drop your temperature. So it's in Celsius, right? So it's 37 is normal. And they were dropping people to 33 and keeping them at 33 for a certain period of time. And then they would slowly warm them up after whatever policy procedure that the hospital, 24 hours, 48 hours, and they bring them back up to normal
because
temperature.
It gives your body a break to heal.
Yeah, so it gives you some time. What happens though in that time frame is that your brain it's not necessarily firing on all cylinders. It's not functioning the way it's supposed to function. So as you start to warm up, hey, guess what? These reflexes are starting to come back. They're starting to move. They can move to pain. Gag reflexes start showing back up. And there's people out there that may disagree with me. You know what? I've seen it. Sorry, I've seen it. People are going to say, oh no, whether they're cold or they're warm, that doesn't change. It does change. I'm sorry, I've seen it. It not only changes metabolically, like how they are going to function, neurologically, also how they're going to function when you're cold versus when you're warm, but it also changes the way that you process and you metabolize certain paralytics and certain medications that do compromise that neural reflex. So it does have a big effect on that. And for his instance, that's too fast.
So the point to this is if you are making decisions like TJ is brain dead, within the first 24 hours, you are taking a huge risk. You are not allowing time for recovery. You're not allowing time to have a real picture of what's going on, right? You've seen him during an acute injury, in a moment where he has had a devastating neurologic injury. And just like the emergency room doctor said, clearly there's going to be some brain damage, okay? But to go from that to he's brain dead within the first 24 hours without giving it time to observe, I mean, has he been able to metabolize a medication that they gave him in the emergency room? Has he been given time to warm up? Have you observed how many neural checks have you done in 24 hours? I mean, there's so much here that we could go on.
There's a lot.
There's so much.
But tell me, so let's go to where we were. Coda, when Coda came into this picture, how were you introduced? How'd that come about? Thank you for joining me today on Honor Talk. I'm truly grateful you took the time to listen and honor the incredible stories that remind us of how one life can impact so many others. Before you go, be sure to check out the show notes for links, photos, resources, and additional information related to today's episode. If today's conversation inspired you, please consider signing up to be a registered organ, eye, and tissue donor. You can learn more and register at registerme.org, because saying yes today could give someone a tomorrow. And if you're a medical professional, a donor family, or even a recipient with a story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Your experiences bring hope, education, and understanding to so many others. Visit us at honortalkpodcast.com or connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or even by email if you'd like to come on the show and honor your loved one's legacy or even share your journey. I'm Bobby Gomez, and this is Honor Talk, where we honor those who gave, celebrate those who received, and stand strong with those still waiting.